I think this year is probably the most uncertain year that we will have seen for the two major export markets for the world, so that's the United States and Great Britain, for many years. The principal reasons are political. As I'm sure you're all aware, Donald Trump and communicate them in a very original way. And we have an unprecedented situation in the UK where, having been part of an economic club for 40 years very happily, we are now choosing to depart that club. We don't know what the post-Brexit trade arrangements will be. Equally, we don't know what the United States trade policy will be, well, tomorrow, let alone in a year's time. I think there is a definite feeling of caution and uncertainty within the supply chain because of these shocks that potentially will come into the system. Having said that, the two markets that you mentioned are still incredibly important for Italian wineries, but wineries from other parts of the world as well. And there are some positive developments in both. The younger generation who are drinking less, it is true, but they are spending more money when they are buying wine, and they care more about the product as well. And I think that's a really important point that all marketing businesses need to think about, which is the stories that you tell as businesses are more important now, probably, than ever before. Because if you're chasing a smaller number of buyers or a smaller number of buying occasions, the idea that people will be willing to spend more on something that they desire or that speaks to them is going to be a big factor. I think China remains a big puzzle as a market. We know that the wine consuming tendency amongst the consumers in China has grown dramatically in the past 10 years. What we are less clear on is whether this growth in wine consumption is coherent and sustainable. In other words, are people learning a great deal more about wine and becoming more connected with the product? We know some people in China are, but we also know that some people are still buying wine in the context of their lives simply as a gift to give to somebody. It may never get consumed. Within what's being purchased in China, the wines from the old world, such as France and Italy and to a certain extent Spain as well, have historically done quite well. France in particular. However, the recent years have shown that wines from the New World countries, particularly Australia and Chile, have made great advances in the market and in some cases are now becoming more dominant products. Part of the reason is that in the case of Australia, there is a proximity and there's also a very strong trading relationship. A lot of Chinese people, when they go on holiday, will go to Australia and they have learned about wine from those experiences. Another major issue which the EU as a whole has to deal with now is that there are favourable trading relationships between Australia and China and between Chile and China, which mean that wine, when landed on the docks in Shanghai, is going to be cheaper because it attracts less duty if it comes from Australia or Chile, or in some cases one or two of the other producer countries. The EU does not have that advantage currently, and I think it is suffering a bit at certain price points as a result. And Italy, as part of the EU, is also struggling with that problem. Having said that, China is still a very exciting market. I think there is a long-term growth opportunity there for all major high-quality wine-producing countries. And it's just a question really of getting the trade terms probably onto a level playing field before we will see the market become a little bit more open for products from countries like Italy. So the wine industry for several hundred years has been successful based on the, I guess, two pillars of managerial or business excellence. The first is in product development. So we've had winemakers who have been very skillful at creating products that are of high quality, and we've also had good salespeople. So since Madame Clicquot or people from the Bordeaux region in the 19th century who created this classification of 1855, which allowed the world to see that a product was worth buying because it had a certain cachet or a certain quality standard applied to it. The wine world has done very well out of good sales positioning. I think today, the 21st century has brought many new challenges for the management of wine businesses. I think chief amongst them is this idea that the wine that you make needs to find an audience that is willing to buy it when they have many choices to make, including things that are not wine, but even within the wine category, there is plenty of things they can choose. Choosing your product over somebody else's is going to become more of a factor which is multivariate in nature. In other words, it's not just the taste of the product that's going to drive people to buy a certain product, although that will still matter. It's going to be how that product looks. Is it available to them where they want to buy wine? Is it a price that they can afford, but does it make them feel better about themselves? Is there a story behind it that makes people want to be part of that story, to talk about that story with their friends? Those are being the factors that really may drive the successful wine brands of the 21st century. And to understand those, you have to understand who you're selling to, why they're buying, and what your product's going to do when it's in their hands. And I think, therefore, that the management education that encompasses those challenges is absolutely a prerequisite, really, of being a successful wine business in this century.